Hey everybody, Josh Hannaberry here, Truck Focus Podcast. Welcome back to another really good episode that we have for you today. A good friend of mine and fellow industry advocate and industry expert joins the show, Jeremy Woolward. He talks about a lot of cool stuff, just how does core certificate of recognition work, NSC compliance, and how you can use them together to be successful as a carrier as well as from professional driver standpoints. Really good conversation, super excited. And yeah, thanks so much for checking in. So let's get to it. Hey everybody, good day. Josh Hannaberry here, Truck Focus Podcast. Super excited for today. I have a good friend of mine on the episode, Jeremy Woolward. So Jeremy, like myself, is an industry advocate and just personally a really good friend. So I really appreciate him hopping on today. So Jeremy is a safety compliance officer for Chariot Express, which is a local freight and hotshot service company based out of Calgary. Jeremy manages their company's occupational health and safety system, their national safety code programs, their WC programs, and he's a certified H.S.A. through the Alberta Construction Safety Association. Jeremy is also in the preliminary stages of starting his own consulting company, which is super exciting. So it's Pratum Caelum Compliance Services, and he's really going to focus on helping companies that are working in the construction and transportation sectors with the integration of their safety programs. Furthermore, Jeremy is going to focus with carriers on their national safety code audits, known as the audit doctor, which is super cool. And when Jeremy's not at work, you can definitely find him enjoying a good video game, spending time with family. And once all these restrictions ease up, you'll find him on the wrestling mats as he trains to compete for the U.S. Masters Wrestling Open, which is super exciting. So, Jeremy, welcome.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you for having me here. Really do appreciate it.
Absolutely, man. This is it's cool. So you were one of the first people I was very honest with my mindset on having a podcast, and the fact that this is now happening. This is like big goal checked off the list. So
fantastic.
That's awesome.
Well, I'm glad to contribute to that little check mark, that giant check mark of yours. Awesome. And we're gonna have some fun today.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'm excited. So for those that don't know you, can you just explain who are you? Who is Jeremy? And then we'll kind of dive through some stuff.
Well, I would just start with a little bit of a wisecrack. I guess I'm glad we're having a podcast, not necessarily a Tinder profile, because then you see people all swiping left, swipe left. Oh my gosh, the nerd is here. It's like no one has to worry about swiping left or swiping right. But that being said, I say I'm a Calgarian. I wasn't born here. I was born in British Columbia. Moved to Alberta when I was 5. My dad was a member of the RCMP. That's where his first posting was. Between the ages of 5 and 23, kind of lived around Alberta, Red Deer, Whitecourt, Edmonton, Okotoks, Chestermere. Kind of settled in Calgary 2008. Served a mission for my church. I went to the Ivory Coast, which was a very different experience. Got married in 2010. My wife and I have been living here in Calgary ever since. You pretty much nailed all of it there in the bio. But yeah, no, these are things I like to do, and more than just those things. It's like history, policy wonk, kind of tick off people sometimes on social media, aka Twitter. And yeah, so if you want the professional, respectable me, you'll get it everywhere else. Twitter, though, I kind of let the guard down, also slightly. Still nice, but a little bit more cutthroat. But all in all, nice guy, like to work hard and like to really make a difference for the things that I'm doing, and especially in the job I have today with Chariot Express and future endeavors that I have in store for myself.
That's awesome. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. I actually didn't know that about your family. And yeah, moving around a lot, pros and cons. Had a similar upbringing, not so much law enforcement, but with moving around. So I'm familiar with replanting seeds every so often and trying to find out, okay, who am I? Who are my friends? What can I become comfortable in? So
absolutely.
Moving to Alberta actually, because I lived in BC most of my life, but I'm from Ontario. And,
nice.
So migrating from BC to Alberta is, I think you can agree, the best decision that you could make. I'm just very pro Alberta, but it's interesting when you hear other people's backstory. So how'd you get into the transportation industry? What was your segue into this area?
Okay, well, I'd like to say we one awesome Iron Man-esque origin story, but it's rather rather coincidental, I guess would be the best word to describe it. From 2011 to 2017, I was actually working at a TELUS mobility dealership in Okotoks. And yeah, I sold phones. I was a business sales manager for TELUS. I helped companies manage their mobility costs, keep them down, helped pilot a new business initiative for TELUS at the time. So very much spearheaded that. Kind of have a video of myself somewhere along the line doing a quick little blurb about that elsewhere too. Actually, I think I still have a copy of that thing. It's only like 30 seconds, but then along the way, I met a man who was one of my customers, and his name was Rob Wetherill, and he told me that he was running a safety services company, and I always set him up with phones and tablets and all sorts of gadgets. But in 2017, right when things were getting, depending on who you talk to, either recession gets worse or technically you're starting to come out of it, there's no money to be had. And unfortunately, it was not feasible for my employer to keep me. So unfortunately, he laid me off. I was more or less the last man standing and laid me off in July of 2017. A week after the layoff, I'm lying at home, and I get this phone call, and it's Rob Wetherill, and he's like, "Hey, I need some of those mobile smart hubs you guys have. I have to do some training out in Hanna." I'm like, "Well, I know the store has some. We have a whole bunch of them locked up, but I won't be selling them to you because I got laid off." He's like, "What?" Well, yeah, got laid off. Pretty much, there's no way other to describe it. But then out of the blue, it seemed for him that he had an interview. He was interviewing people for an upcoming office administrator job at a safety services company, which I knew about. So he invited me in to interview and did a good interview, my opinion. And I must have impressed somebody because within days he called me back saying, "Yeah, if you want the job is yours." So I started off as an office administrator for Safety Canada Limited, kind of like a subsidiary. It was a subsidiary of Chariot Express, as it were. We operated right across the parking lot. So, and for the first couple weeks that I was there, I was tasked to learn all this, learn the ins and outs of transportation safety, the required components to operate a commercial vehicle in Alberta. So for the first time, I'm looking at this training, and I'm like, okay, what is a glad handle? Okay, what is an axle spacing? What are these things? Like, and then trying to remember hours of service, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know what I'm doing here. But I found the more I did it, the more I liked it. Nice. And really wanted to learn and really wanted to do a lot more. And as I'm watching what I saw Safety Canada was supposed to be, I kind of got a bug nipped in the ear and kind of nipped in the butt, really, and say, like, you know what, I want this. I think I can do this. I think I can be involved with this. And it just so happened that I was hired at the right time because we had a transportation safety professionals workshop. Robin was being candidated to be a facilitator for. So we had a bunch of people. We had a couple NSC auditors present. We had Vicki Baird, who basically spearheaded the program. She was there evaluating, and it was kind of cool. Like, I got to watch a preview of it the day before and participate in the activities. I'm like, okay, this is cool. Yeah, I can do this. Yeah, I want to be part of this. Unfortunately, as 2017 rolled around, we had to make a decision, and that Safety Canada was not financially viable. It was draining resources that just were in short supply. So as I unfortunately faced the prospect of yet another layoff, my last day, I was invited to go across the parking lot, head over to the president, Chariot's president, Mr. John Forrester's office, and wish him well. And he's like, well, we actually want to hire you here. Nice. We need you to hire you here. We want you to book trucks and potentially be a relief dispatcher, because the dispatchers we have hadn't had a chance to take regular holidays in such a long time. So they needed a body. I accepted, obviously. And from September 2017 to now, I've been here at Chariot, been across the parking lot. And even during those first 2 years where I was sitting at the front desk, answering calls, booking trucks, relieving dispatchers, I never stopped learning. Still want to do more, still want to find out how this crazy world of transportation actually works and learn. It was right around the time where the Alberta government had positioned Bill 30 as the new Alberta Occupational Health and Safety legislation. So there was a whole bunch of changes in 2018,
Right.
and it was exciting, and there's energy there. And I had made some conscious decisions in 2019 that even though I wasn't in the current role, I was still booking trucks, I was going to do the Transportation Safety Professionals Workshop of my own. I figured I've been putting this off for too long, I'm going to go do it. At the same time, I had already applied for the new program the Alberta Motor Transport Association put out. They rolled out their CTSE, CTSP designations. And I'm like, well, you know what? I want that because I want to become a consultant one day. And so I made a decision years ago that I wanted to be one. And then in July of 2019, when the current position for a safety officer opened up here, I walked into my boss's office and I'm like, hey, I'd like a shot if you're willing to take me. 48 hours later, we're sitting at food court in the Sunridge Mall and he's offering me the post. So
good.
And I guess the rest, as you can see from there, is a little bit of history. That's how I landed the current job I'm in. And 2 years coming this July, but it feels like, Josh, it's been forever. It feels like I've been doing this for a decade or more right now.
That's
and
right.
There's always still stuff to learn.
Yes. Yeah, you mentioned a couple of things where I think other people can relate, if it's a layoff, if it's a shift in position. And I always call those pivotal moments because you can at that point decide this is where I'm going. And you mentioned that a couple of times. I decided I asked. And yeah. I'm a big component believer of that too, where we need to be in control. And yeah, so hats off to you. And yeah, 2 years goes by fast. And so you mentioned a couple of things that we'll kind of dive into. Part of it's the NSC auditor. Shout out to Vicky, she's awesome. And obviously shout out to the AMCA. So as you were navigating, at what point did you decide, instead of just self-learning, which a lot of our industry, when we're in our type of positions, you have to do, when did you shift from that focus? You slightly mentioned it to, I'm going to actually take some accredited training from an industry association. At what point did you shift there?
Well, I think the first thing I shifted to was, before anything, I was contemplating going down to Lethbridge College for a summer and do the commercial vehicle enforcement program. And it's still on a bucket list. So you know what? I might take a summer and actually go do that.
Yeah,
just
let's do it together.
Well, if we do, then we can share room. We can share a room at Lethbridge College and cut and keep the cost down.
Yeah, totally.
that'd be fine. So no, I considered doing that because I figured, okay, well, you know what? It would give me a certificate. It would allow me to put my foot in the door and kind of branch out. And at least that way I would know what enforcement officers are looking at. But 4 months away from family, where my wife at the time was still working, like we wouldn't see each other for a whole summer, that didn't set well with me or her.
Yeah.
And then she got sick in 2018. She was diagnosed with relapsing remitting multiple sclerosis. So she was medically retired at 33 and she can't work. We had to move out of our apartment. We're now living with her folks. And yeah, you can't go away for extended periods of time like that.
Right.
But I do believe that things happen as they happen, and whether it's just the universe working or whether you choose to believe in a higher power, the world shifted. Out of the blue, the Alberta Motor Transport Association came up with this designation for the safety professional. And I'm like, well, I can do this. This is home. I can do this here. I don't have to go anywhere to do it.
Yes.
So
I felt the same thing.
Yeah. So that's where it all started. But a lot of it too was realizing, okay, what are the costs? What are everything else? Like at the time, we didn't have a lot of income. So it was going to be a long, drawn out process. But like I said, other things happened and we ended up in the current job. So as much as I'm like, okay, I want to pursue a designation, the reality of the business world is that life has to go on. Things have to continue. So you're getting yourself out of the frying pan and into a fire, as it were. So as much as I'm learning on the job and figuring out and still doing a lot of self-learning, I've begun taking the steps to fulfill my CTSC components. And when I say that's just the beginning, because there's a lot more to do that not necessarily is covered in any curriculum.
Right.
You can't substitute life experience for what's actually going on in a curriculum. And as much as you're getting something out of it, unless you're giving back or unless you're growing or expanding on it, then all it is just theory. Theory without application doesn't really work that well.
Agreed. So do you find that designation aligns well with your HSA as well?
Oh, absolutely it does. And I think it's understand for those people who may not be aware of what the HSA is, but the HSA is a health and safety administrator designation through the ACSA. It is an entry-level designation designed for individuals who may want to become NCSO, so National Construction Safety Officers, but don't have the years experience behind them. They're new to their role. They need the theory. In the construction world, you've been a laborer for years, but now you're going to learn the safety administrative end. An HSA is a place to start. And then on top of that, 3 years practical experience. You can then apply, write the exam, then earn the NCSO designation, which still of itself is still entry level. You're still learning. Like you are not king of the mountain by any way, shape, or form. But I guess that's the point, because it's always about continuous improvement. It just designates that you've taken the time to have this foundation behind you, and that's arming you for success. And I believe that the CTSC, CTSP, with the HSA, NCSO, they drive my worlds very, very well. Like they are very, very much intertwined. Like I looked at it, like I'll be honest, the first foray into this world of safety was because we hold our core through the ACSA. It was a decision made many years ago, and I don't really know all the context behind it, right, but we hold it through them. So I did that training and love that training so much. I guess they call me now their #1 fan for a reason. So I'm going to own it. Good. But no, I'm becoming there, because then you're looking at it and then it's like, okay, how do you apply it to transportation? And then when I started doing my NSE training, my CTSC training late last year, it's all starting to come together where all these pieces start to fit. And another, as you mentioned earlier, one of those aha moments or those pivotal moments was recognizing that the two worlds are more interconnected than one thought possible. But the reality is that people seldom have time to really integrate it. Then came COVID. And the decision was made early last year that I was going to throw a grenade in my office. And I'm still picking up. Rome wasn't built in a day. This office is going to not be organized in a day. It'll take a very long time still. But rebuilding the program from the focus of bridging OHS and NSC together, not just keep them as distant cousins, but it's like, no, they're more symbiotic than people may realize. And right. Then the benefit of working with two associations is you get two very different perspectives, and you manage to marry them in something that works really well, and I think will have a potential to shape safety associations and really shape industries for the better, when you can see that you're not just segregated in your own world. We're all interdependent, interconnected with each other. And I think we need more of that.
Yeah, when I first took my NCSO through the ACSA as well, yeah, I remember it was like a wave that hit me when I was in class one day, and I'm like, hey, I've never heard of any of this before. And I took it with a few years of experience in field and in different leadership style roles. I'm like, never heard of that before, but yeah, it really helped me align my values as a person to focus on the protection of people. But then when you switch, similar to what you've been through, where now you're managing an NSC fleet, you're like, well, I didn't really learn any, like a policy is a policy by definition maybe, but what actually you're trying to control with it, yeah, very different world. So same thing, I was like, that's when I heard of Lethbridge College too, because I was like, well, there has to be something. And then, yeah, when AMCA came out with the CTSP program, like, in that, just the mindset of that designation, I was just like, yes, I'm like, that's exactly what people need, because you want to be confident that you're answering not just the questions law enforcement wants to hear, because that's one side of the conversation.
Yep.
And then, as we've talked about a couple times already, from an audit standpoint, from an NSC compliance standpoint, it's a very different conversation.
Oh, absolutely it is.
Yeah, so it's nice. I agree completely how associations are bridging opportunity, and then people that actually want to advocate behind it, there's substance there, there's actual solution, and then there's areas that can just continue to get better, because it's always a building block.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, like, that's, so when I finished my NCSO, I'm like, it's not enough. So I'm still enrolled at U of A to finish my OH&S designation.
Nice.
And yeah, it's awesome, because they're really good at what they do. They're really helpful to, like, I always have a lot of questions. I know you always have a lot of questions, and it's like, why is that like that? And they'll actually give you an answer instead of, yeah, it's a good question, why is it like that? So I like that, because obviously you're paying to go to a course. And yeah, I always identify as a safety nerd in the sense where I like knowing the whys, because that way I'm confident when I'm speaking. It's not just someone shot from the hip and here we are. So
yeah.
But yeah, so you mentioned a couple of things too. So that was actually kind of where I would like to go, is what is the difference from an NSC standpoint, for a national safety code, for those that are listening, and a health and safety standpoint? And we'll go in the direction of CORE, so certificate of recognition. What are kind of, at a high level, the differences? And then we can kind of dissect from there, if that's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. So to understand here, CORE is voluntary. That is, I guess, the one big designation everyone has to understand. CORE is, at its very core, pun intended, a voluntary program. It is meant for industry, any industry really, and the people in that named industry, to demonstrate their commitment to health and safety by voluntarily subjecting their company to a rigorous health and safety compliance program. And I really hate to use the word compliance, because I'll tell you, it's not compliance. You're either this, or you're either this or that. But again, it's not the law. It's just a voluntary standard. You either meet it or you don't. Whereas the National Safety Code is mandatory. If you are a commercial vehicle operating at a federal status, I have a federal safety fitness certificate of over 4,500 kilograms, or you have a provincial certificate in Alberta that allows you to operate a commercial vehicle of 11,794 kilograms or more, you are mandated by law to have certain programs and practices in place. The two programs, realistically, everyone says they're different. You need to have an NSE binder and an OHS binder. You need this, you need that. But really, at the end of the day, it's about hazard management. Occupational health and safety at its fundamental level is about managing hazards. The transportation, the NSC program, if you whittle it away down to its very, very, like, say, again, to its core, you're going to find it's about managing hazards. The difference is what hazards, or what is the intent, like, who are you protecting? In occupational health and safety, you are protecting the worker, you are protecting your work site. That is what these standards are for. The National Safety Code is about protecting the general public. You are protecting the public, you are protecting infrastructure, you are protecting the environment, and you are protecting yourself. But for the transportation industry, they're the same hazards. Doesn't matter what three letters you attach to it, the hazards are the hazards are the hazards. The ability to manage, mitigate, and control them is paramount. The difference is how you evaluate your success in controlling and mitigating those hazards. CORE is a voluntary process where you take your safety culture to the next level and you demonstrate, okay, I'm really going to create a formal hazard assessment, and I'm going to look at everything we do, and I'm going to risk rank it, and I'm going to put my administrative or PPE or engineered controls in there. I'm going to do my formal inspections. I'm going to investigate incidents, determine loss and causality, going to train people, all that good fun stuff. We're going to analyze the heck out of it. NSC, very simple, straightforward. Do you do it? Yes or no?
Totally.
Are you driving within your legally allowed hours? Yes or no? Do you have enough insurance? Yes or no? Is your vehicle maintained according to NSC Standard 13 Part 2 Schedule 1? Yes or no? They don't care about all the subtleties or the nuances. They're like, do you have it? Yes or no? And they even have a reference guide that tells you this is what it is.
Right.
Core, from my vantage, from what I've done as a core auditor, is you give them the marks. You give them the marks, and you validate why you gave them the marks. It's about you take a look at the question, you answer the question in context, you identify the positive indicators, the negative indicators, and then you justify your score. NSC is, I don't want the justifications. I don't care about the excuses. You're compliant or you're not. And that's your difference. The benefit and the real win for companies is when you take that NSC compliance mindset and you amalgamate it as part of your occupational health and safety program, is when you really start to move mountains.
Yes.
Because then you start looking at these programs interdependent of each other. Like, yeah, they're very much interdependent. When you look at it from that vantage point, you start seeing your blind spots that you didn't know you had.
Right.
And then it's like, oh, this makes a lot more sense to me now. Oh, I'm looking at administrative controls for driving, like fatigue. That's a hazard. How do I control it? Oh yeah, my hours of service. That's a hazard control. Oh, a weights and dimensions policy. That's a hazard control because I'm controlling these big vehicles and how they're moving and cargo, how to secure cargo. Oh my gosh, I just finished something about that where it's a series of engineering and administrative controls to get it done. And then you look at it, it's like, well, if you're compliant, yes or no, your core is going to be really awesome because you're going to be like, yes, I have it. Yes, I have it. My range score is always going to be 10, 10, 5, 10, 20, 50, whatever you want to call it, because it's already there.
So that's my next question that you just really highlighted. So
Right.
thank you is, so you do believe there's an opportunity for the two to coexist, and they should coexist.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
There should be no reason why you can't. But again, Josh, it's a paradigm shift. It's a cultural shift, and it goes from everybody. Now, I remember when I finally took my TSPW in December of 2019, the facilitator, I'm not going to name names, but my facilitator was talking about NSC audits, and we were doing the compliance quizzes that they had in the handout books for participants. And I'm working with somebody on a question, and my colleague in class didn't understand the question. So I'm like, you got to read it like this, this, and this. When we do it as core, the facilitator pops up, this isn't a core. We're not doing core. I'm like, you're not letting me finish the sentence, please.
Right.
Let me finish. It's like, when you look at it, you're reading what's there. Like, this is what you're looking for. This is what you have to validate. Now when you're asked a question in the NSC audit, they're looking for very, very specific items, words, phrases. The question itself gives you the answer. Those are the things you're looking for. It's either there or it's not. And then the facilitator also made a comment how, like, people need to keep their stuff separate because I see all these OHS safety binders from the H.S.A. core people, and they're not right, and this and that. And I'm like, really? You just haven't seen the right one yet.
That's right.
So I took it as a challenge. I'm like, fine, you want a binder that's going to like mix the world together? You're on. I hope one day I get to share that with that same facilitator, because I'm really quite proud of it.
I was told to be mindful of the size of the manual, like your safety maintenance program.
Yeah.
Is because that's one of the last things some auditors will look at.
Yeah.
And they want it right there. It's like, okay, then you put it right there. Like, you make it really simple, so that way you prove that you've gone above and beyond. It's not just yeah, I think I have that, check, check, check. It's no, we live this, and this is proof of it.
Oh,
but
yeah,
totally to your point. Yeah, I've heard that conversation before too, and I'm like, I have to politely disagree.
Yeah. Now, if I were to go take my binder that's sitting behind me and flip it open here, page upon page upon page, you will see, Josh, what I took the time to really go through and approach designing a program from the eyes of an auditor from both perspectives. And my safety manuals are, my framework is my core through the H.S.A. It's my 10 elements. But then in those 10 elements, your transportation just slides in quite nicely. Your commitment to transportation safety, well, that's your management commitment. That's element 1. This policy goes here. Your broad overview of your national safety code, your rules and procedures. These are all transportation commitments. That's element 1. Training, here you go, element 4. Preventative maintenance. Inspections and preventative maintenance is element 7 of the H.S.A. core. And that is 36, that's about 33, 35% of a total score on an NSE compliance audit. My element 7's rather big,
Yes.
but it's all broken, but it's all broken down. Element 10, managing my program. Am I checking my carrier profile every month? Am I noticing the trends? Am I auditing my hours of service? Those are the things that they're looking for. This is where they fit. And then I just gave away the farm when I'm like, okay, I have them open the manual and I tell them this is element 1. This is, I write on there, this should be viewed by core and NSC auditors. This should, or element 2, like public and visitors on the work site. This is not viewed by NSC auditors. Like realistically, I've done all the work. Now it's just come in and do it. And that's what I've done with my approach for my whole program here, is taking it from the perspective of an auditor. What is an auditor going to be looking for from both systems? And then having your checks and balances in place to make sure that when an auditor comes in, you're like, okay, I'm going to pay you a couple grand to do this. Well, here you go. Here's a folder. Here's a flash drive. Here's a computer. I'll see you in a couple hours. I'm going to go do something else. If you're here longer than 8 hours, we need to talk.
Yes.
Because it's all right. It's all right there.
And that's one thing. So speaking to the audience right now, this is why I consider Jeremy my go-to expert in core, in NSC. A lot of the conversations is because you can tell how calculated his thought pattern is to make sure that it's like that. It's, here you go. I'll be in the other room. Let me know when you need me. Let me know when you're done. You're not done in 8 hours. All my stuff's right there. Like that is, you made something that can be quite difficult very simple. So that's why I'm super excited as you grow your consulting side too. But also it's a good reflection for Chariot Express, just the level of expertise that they allow in their workplace, because I do know other carriers that kind of shut down certain people and it's like, or you can let me thrive. But yeah, that's a big highlight for Jeremy, is just, you have a question. It could be about the smallest thing. And he's like, okay, well, I'm going to give you a really good answer because I've thought about it. So that's good for you, man. That's awesome.
Yeah, so my drivers might think I'm a little crazy and a little anal retentive, but I'm like, well, you know what? At the end of the day, I told them, it's like, I want you guys to go home to your families and I want you to make a living.
Yes.
And it's like, you can't do that if you're injured or if you're dead. And I don't want that. Nobody wants that. So yes, I'll be anal retentive because that is what I'm supposed to do. But at the end of the day, I'm keeping you safe. I'm keeping you healthy. That is, if you're frustrated with me, well, that's the small price to pay, that you get to go and enjoy your life to its fullest. So yeah, I don't have any regrets in that. I guess that must be the cop kid mentality in me.
I say the same thing though. I'm like, you protect yourself by protecting the public, and by doing so, you protect equipment, and you meet the ultimate goal as you service the customer, because that's how we all earn paychecks. So, but it always starts with self to protect the public, and
that's right.
Yeah, no, that's so. In regards to core, I'll kind of shift more into the core focus because I love these conversations. So, if you've never heard of core before, we've talked about it at a pretty good depth. Can you just do basically a quick blurb overview? I know quick is hard, but just a blurb overview of what is core and what's kind of a high level steps to obtain core. And we'll kind of go down that route if that's okay.
Not a problem, Josh. That's perfect. So for those who aren't aware, like I said, core we talked about is called Certificate of Recognition. It is a program managed by Partners in Injury Reduction. So it is an offset of WCB, managed by Alberta Immigration and Labor. Sorry, they had a name change in 2019. So labor and immigration. The point of it is it's to reward employers and companies that excel in health and safety by offering WCB premium rebates. So that's the carrot. That's the absolute carrot. The real perk is like a 20% rebate in WCB premiums if you hold an active core. So huge incentive, right?
Yes.
So the next part is, so the first part about it is you check and see, well, do you have a WCB industry code? Some people do, some people don't. Not every industry is mandatorily required to have a WCB to carry WCB. They could carry their own private options. But for the industry codes that do participate in the core program, like you go through WCB, you check and see where you fit. Then you pick what's called a certifying partner. Now, some certifying partners, well, actually all certifying partners are reflections of the industry codes that they serve. Now, not all industry codes are necessarily covered by a safety association. Some of them are very broad in scope. Some of them are a lot more generalized. For example, AMTA is a certifying partner. They cover the trucking industry. So the big freight, specialized trucking, and then general trucking, which is my industry code, 50714. Then you have the ACSA, the Alberta Construction Safety Association, that covers all the construction trades. And there's too many of them to list. I'm not even going to try. WCB has a whole huge report on it. Energy Safety Canada is another one that manages oil sands. They are the resource for the oil and gas industry in Alberta. Companies, however, have the freedom to choose the certifying partner of their choice. You can choose whomever you want to certify your core. You do, however, have to meet their standards for it. So there is training involved. There is effort on your part. You have to put some skin in the game in order to get the rebate. Your health and safety management system, your HSMS, which is the foundation of your whole strategy, has to reflect the standards of the core audit instrument that you are going to use. Now, not to scare people away, an Energy Safety Canada core and an AMTA core or an ACSA core or an Alberta Municipality for Health and Safety Association, they're all similar because the approved instrument is not done at a partner level. It's done at Alberta Labor and Immigration. It's done from partners and industry reduction. They set the standard with a generic audit instrument. The safety associations then have the liberty to tweak it, not change it, but they can tweak it. Right. And they also have the ability to add their own elements to it. I know the ACSA used to have drug and alcohol as part of one of their standards. It was one of their extra elements. They no longer use it. They did streamline a lot of it when Bill 30 became law. The AMTA uses the NSC compliance quiz as a component of their core. So you're getting that little NSC world as like a little epilogue through an AMTA core. But your elements are consistent. You go through it. Then you voluntarily subject yourself to an audit. Some associations, you're paying for consultant auditors to come in. Some, like the ACSA, offer what's called a peer audit program. So instead of paying a consultant to come in, basically you're trading time. You're paying it for with another company. Another company does yours, you go and do theirs. As a matter of fact, I just received a letter not long before we started today, Josh, from the ACSA saying, we have an audit activated for you. So I'm actually now in the middle of everything. Right. I actually am doing a core recertification audit as we speak. So
good job, man.
I'll make sure I take some notes for the next time we talk core, and I can get a little bit of like tips to succeed or trade. Totally. So totally. We'll go through there. And at the end of the day, when the audit is done, it gets submitted in for quality assurance from the certifying partner. And once it meets that, it goes to partners and injury reduction for final approval. And then everything's good. Then you get a nice certificate that states that you are a core, that you are a core holder. Now, for first-time companies, you hold a 1-year core. After 12 months, you get recertified. You then hold a 3-year core, and then it's year 1 is maintenance. So you're doing it internally. You're checking, make sure you're addressing defects from the certification audit. Year 2 is more maintenance, where you're now addressing the defects again, but also saying what are the steps we're using to continually improve the program. And then the next year, the year 3, is a recertification process. So then someone from the outside has to come in, give you the objective look, and go through it. And this cycle repeats itself. So always certification, 2 years of maintenance, certification, 2 years of maintenance. At the same time, you also make sure that if you have specific training requirements or components, that you're always up to date. The example, the H.S.A, to hold a core, like we have to have 4 courses carried by people on staff. Doesn't necessarily have to be the same person, but you have to demonstrate that you have 4 of their required elements covered by somebody prior to being admitted. And if you want to be an H.S.A peer auditor, well, then you have to keep your auditor certification valid for the entire time, and it's up to you to get it recertified. No one's going to tell you, oh, you have to redo it. You have to self-manage your own certs. Just as peace in mind, I have to get my research done in July of next year. Nice. So there you go.
Good. Yeah, that's awesome. So with all of that said, who should obtain core? Like in your opinion, like is it everyone needs to, or yeah, how's that go?
I think everybody should, honestly. Now you're going to sit there and you may ask me, well, what about 1 or 2 people? Like, I'm only a company of 1. Why do I need it? I'm like, I'll tell you why you need it. You need it because even though it's voluntary, a lot of contractors, a lot of prime contractors out there are looking for it. They are looking for it from an insurance perspective. They're looking at it from a liability perspective. They want to make sure that the contractors that they're hiring are competent, are safe, and have something to back it up. If you hold a core, it means that you should, for the most part, be taking those extra steps to ensuring a positive health and safety culture. And if you're a person of 1 or a carrier of 1 or 2, then you have what's called the C Core. It's a small employer certificate of recognition. Currently eligible for companies under 10. Right now, I hear whispers there might be more, but we don't know. But it's a little bit more streamlined. Not nearly as, I would say rigorous, because really it's not rigorous. It's just time. And some things you just won't have a sampling of in a full core when you have 1 or 2 people. So a C core looks at those same elements. Some of them they break down a little bit further, but it's a review. They don't call it an audit. They call it a review, but they still treat it with the same due care and attention as you would a full audit. It goes for quality assurance. You have to show your work, your sampling, justify why you're scoring it the way you score it. And if it passes quality assurance, then small employers too benefit from those same WCB rebates, benefit from having that list on file, because the government of Alberta will list every company that holds core in the province. And it's a tool for contractors to pick the best people for the job.
Right. Yeah, it's a nice competitive edge, as well as you're proving to yourself and to others that you take it seriously. And
absolutely.
Yeah, it's nice. I personally like it when prime contractors have that as a mandate. And I do hope in the very near future, logistics companies do the same kind of thing with NSC, where you have to at least be satisfactorily audited before you can be a carrier on my list. But that could be a conversation for a different day. So kind of respect with time. I know we both have other stuff on the go. Was there anything that you'd like to share kind of as final thoughts?
Well, I guess final thoughts. You mentioned I was in the brief beginnings of setting up my own compliance. So I guess I'll just kind of give a few minutes to do a little bit of a self blurb here. So like I said, my goal one day is to become an NSC third-party auditor. So that is the prize. That's my prize. That's the I. But there's going to be a long time to go before that happens. There's stuff that has to happen along the way. But it doesn't mean I can't not or cannot be part of that environment. In fact, there's a way I can serve not only the third-party auditors, but carriers as a whole. And that's where Pratum Caelum came in. So it's Latin for Prairie Heaven Compliance Services. It's like, wouldn't it be divine if everyone was compliant? So that's kind of where I went with it. So realistically, like there are third-party transportation safety consultants out there who are so knowledgeable about their fields, and you do, and sometimes you don't want to compete with what people already are doing well. Like you and I already know people who are successful in compliance, in all the little technical, in vehicles, in insurance, stuff like that. I'll tell you, I'm not. That's not me. Me, like I say, I'm a policy nerd. I'm an amateur politico. So legislation, those type of things, that's my strong suit. So I'm approaching this from, okay, my job is to bridge, or my focus will be to bridge construction and transportation together, recognizing that there's things both can learn from each other. Then on top of that is building health and safety programs that reflect that. So it's going to a construction, more so on the construction side of things, because they already have their OHS. It's now bringing their NSC into the fold. And then from a kind of transportation side, it's like, okay, here's how you integrate your OHS into this, or here's how you could, and make it viable. Because they say, frankly, there's room in the transportation industry for more core holders. So that's kind of one of the aspects where Pratum Caelum is going to serve the public that way. But also too is when it comes down to NSC audits. Now this is the big one here. I don't want to take away any business from any of my friends in the third-party auditor club, because that's really not it. But at the same time, I don't want to have them put in a position where they potentially could be in conflict or with each other, because if you hire a contractor or consultant, you can't necessarily consult or vice versa. So you need a Switzerland. You need a neutral third party who's willing to work with everybody, willing just to take the data. And I guess as the good friend, as a good guy, Gil Grissom from CSI always said, follow the evidence. So it's like, follow the facts, follow the data, right? And look at what happened or what on audit from an objective standpoint, recognize, okay, this is what you did. This is what you didn't do. This is where the gaps are. Now let's work together to actually fill the gaps. Let's bridge the gaps. At the same time, you're not sitting there and you're like, oh, and having consultants be like, oh, well, we're doing this, but my consultant said this or this said this. And then you don't want that. There's already too much of that where people are, I guess, sometimes trying to like undercut each other. And I don't want that, because these third-party auditors and carrier compliance reviewers, there's so few of them and there's so many carriers. They can't do it all. They're going to burn themselves out. What they really need, and what I find is where I see myself having value, is taking the data they have to work with and then going to a company and saying, you know what, I don't have skin in this game, but I can help you succeed if you want to. And that's, again, comes back to my one little blurb from my own spiritual side, right? As our church, like the LDS or Mormon church, is all about service. It's all about charity and all that good fun stuff. But it's like, you know, when you're helping another person out, like that's some of the greatest gifts in the world is rendering service. So you know what? Render service for a living. Yeah, make a little bit here and there, but ultimately saving lives. Like there can be no greater service. So that's where Pratum Caelum is going to make a difference here in Alberta.
Incredible, man. Incredible. And I don't know if you can read it behind me, but I always
yeah, I like it. I can see it.
Be
there.
Awesome, save lives.
Yeah, I see that. That's awesome.
Yeah, where our mindsets definitely align, and I think that it's nice because we've kind of built over the last 18 months or so, 24 months maybe, a niche kind of community of people that they're solving different problems to the same person. And
exactly.
Yeah, 1000% you have my support on like that entire mission, because I know you're going to be really good. It's really good for our industry, but just once carriers, and construction companies, but once they understand that when you operate within the boundaries of compliance, you actually make more money.
Yeah.
Because that's always like the kind of the tipping point. What's it going to cost? It's not about what it's going to cost. What's it going to save, and whose is it going to save? And once you work with someone like Jeremy, honestly, it's the proof's in the pudding. Like it's incredible. So really appreciate that, man. Thanks so much. How do people that want to reach out to you now, as you, well, I know you're still an industry advocate, I know you're really involved. And then as you eventually become the consultant, the business, all that good stuff. But when people want to get in touch with you, say tomorrow, where do people go?
Well, they can find me there on LinkedIn. So Jeremy Woolward, just as it sounds here. And I know you're going to spell it perfectly in the description for the podcast. You can find me there. I am on Facebook. Again, my ugly mug is on Facebook, so please don't swipe left. It is who you say I say to be. If you want to brave the more cynical Tony Stark approach to my brain, well, you could follow me on Twitter, but I don't necessarily recommend it. You can send an email. I actually have an email all set up for myself. Make sure I actually give me a sec to look here. Make sure I actually got it right because I just created this the other day. So hold on. Okay, so here we go. So the email you can send things to is Jeremy Jeremy .Woolward WOOLWARD _ H.S.A @outlook.com. And then again, if you know me, well, you have my phone number. If not, you want to call me, well, then you can call me here at the office and we can make some connections. I'm still here at Chariot Express all the time, 403-252-4047. Say hi to me, and if you need a hot shot, call Chariot, and I'll book the call in at the same time. Win-win across the board. We operate Alberta, Saskatchewan, Manitoba, BC, and if I have to, I'll go into Ontario, but we're not international, so we have no right to cross the border. So unfortunately, we're relying on the bridge in Nipawin to stay open so we can actually get to the eastern side of the country. So, but yeah, Western Canada, we got that. We got that covered.
Incredible. So, well, Jeremy, honestly, like I said at the very beginning, this was a massive check to the goal board for myself. I think this just further explains our friendship and why we can share the advocacy for the people in our industry. And I'm super excited, even just the next steps for yourself as you continue to finish, obviously, the designation. And then, as you continue to make an impact at Chariot in our industry, and then eventually with the consulting side too. It's, very, very excited for you, man. So thanks so much for hopping on today.
Thank you, Josh, for having me on, my first podcast. So this was fun. I look forward to doing it again.
Absolutely. Yeah. And to highlight that there will be more, Jeremy highlighted some really key components that publicly we're going to talk about a lot more into. So what's the training requirements, NSC core, how do you build a core safety maintenance program, all of that good stuff. So stay tuned for that. And thanks so much again, Jeremy. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, Josh. Thank you.
Thanks, bud.
Well, that's all for today's episode. Thank you so much, Jeremy, for coming onto the podcast to give us some really good insights in areas that definitely is your expertise. It was really nice and really encouraging just to hear all of the components from core, NSC, and just the benefits from a carrier standpoint to want to go above and beyond. And it was really good just to talk about your future company that's starting right away. And just thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Everyone else, thank you. Thank you so much for all of your support as the Truck Focus podcast continues to bring our experts to you. And just, again, the amount of support, encouragement, greatly appreciated. I ask that if you're watching this video on YouTube that you subscribe by pressing that little red button. Just simply push subscribe, because the greater the following, the greater the impact. If you're listening to this in a different platform, same thing. I ask that you subscribe, like, share, tell other people that you feel need to hear this episode. And just thank you again for all of your support. Have a wonderful day. Bye.